This is a short story about my grandparents, Archie and Gladys Packer. Archie was born in 1896 to Jabez Packer and Mary Gapes. He died in 1970. In his early life he lived at Auburn, Wentworth Falls in the Blue Mountains, but I think most of his young life was spent around the Harris Park, Auburn area, where he went to Auburn Public School. On the 15th of August 1915, Archie and Roy Packer volunteered for the Australian Forces for World War I. On the 20th of January 1916, their boat landed at the Suez Canal, where they went into reserve forces for the Gallipoli campaign. Then they caught a ship to France. On the 27th of March, they landed in Toulon, France, and the following day they disembarked at Marseille. After a 3-day, 2 nights journey on a train, they were disembarking at Wallen-Capelle, 6 kilometres from Hazelbrook in the north of France. The first battle they went into was at the area of the Rouge du Bois, or Redwood, near Sailly in France. On the 19th of July, they then transferred by motor buses to Albert, to the front near Pozières. After the battles of Pozières and Mouquet Farm, they then went to Ypres in Belgium. Archie went on to fight in many of the severest battles that the Australian forces fought in World War I, including Pozières, Mouquet Farm and Passchendaele. During his time there, Archie and his brother kept in touch at home with letters, and I have copies of some of those letters now from August 1916. And on his return from the war, Archie wrote a short story about his time in France. This is a little excerpt from his story. Next day we marched through Albert and camped in the trenches on the hill. It was raining very heavily and we were told to make ourselves as comfortable as possible for the night. In the middle of the night we had to fall in and then march to the front line, which was at Mouquet Farm, and we relieved the 51st Australian Battalion just before dawn. Things were very quiet that day and the next. The second night word had passed around that our engineers were going to dig a sap, and we were not to fire, being just on top of the hill overlooking Martinpuch and Courcelette. We could see them plainly on the skyline, and in the morning it was found that it was the Fritz who had dug in the sap. The Huns had been massing that night and were marching up in hundreds, quite openly, until our artillery had dispersed them. Next day we were shelled very heavily by a battery of our own big guns. Our platoon, number 6, suffered heavily, until I was the only private left. That night we were issued with 2 bombs apiece, a pick and a shovel, and an extra 100 rounds of ammunition, also 48 hours of rations, and were told to take the sap the Germans had dug in the previous night. The barrage had started and everyone was waiting the word to go when everything was cancelled on account of the barrage not having lifted that morning, and our bombing platoon was chopped with the shells, some of them our own. An extract from a letter in August 1916 to his brother Cliff. Well, you were asking me what the trenches were like. Well, to start off with, where things are pretty lively, they stink like a bone mill, as there are plenty of dead over the parapet into a shell hole. Even if they get a chance to bury them, the next shell is bound to blow them up again. It seemed to me to be an awful thing to walk on dead men or see them lying about, but you soon get used to it. It does not make any difference to me how bad the stink is or how near I am to the body. It does not turn me off my tucker. Well, that is the dead side of trench life. The other side takes a bit of getting used to. You have practically only two things to do. One is to hold the trench and the other is to shoot any of the enemy you can see. In 2011, I finally got to do a tour of the Somme and Flanders battlefields, accompanied by my daughter Lisa and her husband Nick. It was a very moving experience to visit the Menin Gate in Ypres, Belgium, where some 30,000 soldiers are named who have unknown graves. This area was near some of World War I's fiercest battles, Passchendaele, Polygon Wood, Hill 60. While in Ypres, I was able to visit one of Archie's cousins' graves, Charles Gapes, son of John Gapes Sharp of Granville. We then visited the battlefield around Albert in France, where Archie fought in the battles of Pozieres and Bouquet Farm. Gladys was born in 1896 to William Robinson and Martha Northey. Her early years were in Young Street, Annandale, and when she was 13 they moved to Granville. Nana related some of these other instances to me about her early life. She went to Darling Road School, Rozelle, till she was 12. She met Archie on the 27th of October 1918. At the age of 18, that was in 1914, Gladys, her brother Bert and Roy spent 6 weeks at North Head quarantine station during a smallpox scare, but it turned out they did not have smallpox. After they got married in 1919 at Guildford Methodist Church, they built a house in Elizabeth Street, Guildford. But during the Depression period, they found that they could rent the house out to nearby shopkeepers, the Wilsons, who had the butcher's shop, and they moved near to Gladys Packer at Lewisham in order to save money. They lived in Parramatta Road at Annandale, just near the overpass, the railway overpass to Darling Harbour. In 1935, they opened a greengrocer's shop at Grenfell, and Gladys's other brothers and sisters similarly opened other greengrocers at Bowral, Forbes and Parks, but they were unable to make wages, and after 6 months their greengrocer scheme collapsed. Archie and Gladys had 2 children, Roy, my father, and his sister Mavis. Archie worked at the Sydney Water Board for most of his life, where he was a storeman, and he liked to play bowls every weekend at Guildford Bowls Club. Gladys was an avid churchgoer at the Guildford Church of Christ, not far from their home. I remember a number of large family get-togethers at their house, particularly on the return of his brother Cliff and his wife Mabel in 1956, and their 50th wedding anniversary, Archie's 50th anniversary, in 1979. I remember the times I used to visit them with Dad during the week, in the evenings when I was young, in the late 50s and early 60s, when Grandpa would often talk to me and Dad about his experiences in World War I. Archie also served in the army in World War II, but only in Australia. Archie died in 1970. Gladys went on to live a long life, dying in 1993 at Westmead at 97 years of age.
Roddy's Dennis a bit older than Pete.
Yeah, that's young. That's young. All good.
You have to go.
Yeah, well, they always give me something that's unusual. Did you take my best side, I hope?
Yeah.
You're different places, eh?
What I do is I've done interviews with them. I've sat them down for a couple. I've done about 5 or 6 hours with Mum. I've done 2 hours with Dad.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I've taken it.
Oh.
Oh, he's
Yeah. The face looks nice anyway, don't they? We'll see you then after, alright. We'll see you after Christmas. We'll come up and...
Yes.
And then we'll bring you down. Roy could easily nick up and get you and bring you down.
You have to think about it for a couple of weeks.